2025 was a record year for executions, according to Amnesty International in its annual Global Death Penalty report. Amnesty says 2,707 people were executed last year in 17 countries. The rise is largely driven by Iran, which executed at least 2,159 people, twice as many as in 2024. But there were also increases in executions in several other countries. The true figure is most likely much higher, with China, believed to be the world's biggest executioner, not included in the figures. And for more on this, I can welcome Chiara Sangiorgio, who is Death Penalty Advisor at Amnesty International. Good morning, Chiara, and thank you very much for joining us. 2025 was a record year for executions. That figure was largely driven by protests in Iran, but there has been a proportional rise in execution in other countries too.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Yes, what we saw last year was a resurgence of the use of the death penalty, a resurgence that was rooted in fear, in the use of the death penalty as a tool of control and to crush dissent. That was true in Iran, which, as you said, was the country primarily responsible for the huge spike in executions that we recorded. But that was true also for the United States, for Egypt, Singapore, and Kuwait, also double or even triple their execution. We saw the death penalty being used as a tool to show the strong hand of the state, whether it was in response to high crime rates or driven by perceived threats of crime or security. We also saw a resurgence of the death penalty in the context of the war on drugs. For example, more than 900 executions in Iran were carried out for drug-related offenses, and that was true also across other countries. Now, what the figures also tell us.
Now, one conspicuous absentee from the report is China, which does not release its figures on executions. How does Amnesty deal with that?
So Amnesty continues to monitor the use of the death penalty in China, and we believe that the number of people executed and sentenced to death continue to remain in the thousands. What we saw once again also for China was again the resort to the death penalty to lift the veil of secrecy as a way for the authorities to send a message, a political message that they are dealing harshly with crime. We've seen some choreographed coverage of the death penalty as an exemplary punishment, for example. We have seen the authorities announce executions in the lead up to the World International Drugs Day. And we also seen the death penalty being used to punish corruption. There was a sudden increase in the number of death sentences that we recorded for corruption, particularly in relation to high-level officials or officials in companies accused of a huge number of corruption.
If I could just cut across you there, sorry. Do you think there's less pressure being exerted on countries that carry out the death penalty, or is it the case that there's not sufficient leverage for, say, countries from the European Union to influence those governments?
We must never stop asking countries to end the use of the death penalty. We have seen a concerted effort. What the figures also tell us is that it is a minority of countries that was responsible for this huge resurgence of executions last year. We have 17 countries, which is remained in the low figures that we have seen since 2018. We are seeing the number of countries progressively shrinking. So we do think that pressure helps. Pressure has been resulting in also some changes in some of these countries. For example, Vietnam reduced its number of crimes that carry the death penalty by 8, reducing it to 10 offenses, including drug transportation. So this is an example to show that even the countries that are hardcore supporters of this punishment, with pressure, with continued engagement, we can see that the use of the death penalty may change, and we might also hope for eventual abolition.
Now, you mentioned there Vietnam, which it's reducing the number of crimes punishable by the death penalty. Are there any other areas of progress that you noticed in the fight against the death penalty in 2025?
We have seen countries that, for example, the result of countries that took steps in previous years, like Barbados or Malaysia, they took steps to abolish the mandatory death penalty, and that has certainly led to a decrease in the number of the sentences imposed. For example, in Malaysia, we've seen since 2023 a decrease by a third of the new death sentences every year. In Barbados, we are seeing that almost all the sentences have been commuted. The same, like we saw progress, for example, in Zimbabwe, where all the cases that were under sentence of death have been going through to the courts to be sentenced. So there is a clear evidence that reforms will, maybe in a slightly longer time frame, but like reforms are bearing fruit, which is why we have to continue to denounce the executions that happen and continue to campaign for abolition.
Now, one instance in the past year was Israel in implementing a law which would allow for the execution of alleged terrorists from the Palestinian territories. And this law applies only to Palestinian citizens. What has Amnesty to say about that?
We have condemned and denounced and asked for opposition to the law. We have denounced not only the discriminatory aspect of the death penalty that is contained in the law, but also the waiving of fundamental safeguards of due process, of fair trials that have been embedded into this law. There is still time for Israel not to implement this law, and we're still calling for that implementation to be on hold and for steps to be taken to get rid of these laws and address the fundamental issues that are at the core of the discrimination and the disparity in treatment of the Palestinians.
Now, even in countries where the death penalty is no longer legal, such as EU countries, there is a surprising level of public support for it. Have you observed any changes in public opinion, and is there a danger of backsliding on the legislative level in some countries in response to that?
What the increases in the number of executions of 2025 have shown us is that there is an ongoing little combination of the death penalty being rooted in the narratives and rhetoric around state security and executions being carried out. So yes, there is definitely a danger that if these narratives continue, we might see further countries go backwards or doing setbacks. What we are trying to emphasize is that the death penalty is never the solution. It does not help tackle the root causes of crime. It is discriminatory in that it affects disproportionately those who are at most disadvantaged. And it is important that even as part of today, we keep on denouncing the death penalty for what it is. It is not the magic solution to crime. It is a punishment that affects human rights, is discriminatorily applied, and does not really make us safer.
Thank you very much for that, Chiara Sangiorgio, who is the death penalty advisor for Amnesty International.